I'm announcing today that I'm running for President of the United States of America.
And that's South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who officially is now running for president. He joins a crowded field of Republicans running for president, also a growing field, I should say, which may become even more crowded in the coming days. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins me now from North Charleston, South Carolina. Bob, good to see you out on the campaign trail. So, obviously Donald Trump has been leading the field in poll after poll, but that doesn't appear to be deterring others from getting into the race. We see that with Scott today. I know you were at his campaign launch earlier today. What is his pitch? Where does he see himself fitting in this field?
Caitlin, you've covered Senator Scott as well as anyone in the country, and let's have a little conversation maybe. I mean, it seems like Senator Scott in his speech today was definitely positioning himself as a traditional conservative who has conservative views on issues like abortion, on the economy, but he's trying not to take that shot at former President Trump politically. He really wants to carve his own space in the Republican Party, but as you've covered, many challenges in the road ahead.
Yeah, Bob, it's really interesting that you say that because it seems like, he doesn't want to go after Trump directly, but it seems like the essence of his campaign is designed as a contrast to Trump, this kind of optimistic vision for the future, this positivity campaign, and not willing or wanting to really go after his rivals. Is that kind of how the campaign is fashioning itself, or do we expect the gloves to come off?
It's also interesting, Caitlin, that they're fashioning themselves as the quiet favorite of the Republican establishment. Let's listen to Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the #2 Senate Republican who showed up here in North Charleston earlier today.
I think people are anxious for a positive, hopeful, aspirational candidate. I hope there's a really wide lane for him out there, and I think he draws on the very best of the past. He's got a heritage that goes back to the kind of the Reagan years, but he also is somebody who's very much about the future. And you heard him talk about that today, and I think that's what the American people want to hear, and that is, what are you going to do for the future of this country, and restore that optimism, that hope, that positive voice that I think we've been lacking in our politics today.
So I was watching Senator Thune, Caitlin. He was in the rafters at the Scott event. Larry Ellison, the billionaire founder of Oracle, was there. And behind Larry Ellison was former governor of South Carolina, Mark Sanford. They were all standing there, kind of their arms folded, listening to Senator Scott. And in him, they see someone who could be their standard bearer, someone who could represent the views of the Wall Street Journal editorial page, the business community, social conservatives. But they're trying to see, does he have the energy, the momentum, the money to break through? For now, they're feeling pretty good, but it's a long road ahead.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear that call out of Larry Ellison. I mean, he is going to be donating a lot of money, already has, to Scott's endeavors. You had this conversation with Thune. I mean, this is just really important to point out that this is the #2 in leadership, as you mentioned. What else did Thune tell you, and what does it say about this endorsement? I mean, do we expect others to follow suit here, or is Thune kind of going out on his own? He's #2 to Mitch McConnell.
Leader McConnell is someone who has not pulled his punches when it comes to former President Trump. Senator Thune, someone who has a lot of friends in the Senate Republican Conference who are looking for an alternative to Trump. And they see in Senator Scott a colleague, but they also see an option. They want an option at this stage. And some of them are not totally comfortable with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is expected to get into the race later this week, at least in terms of filing his candidacy. They see in DeSantis the same kind of populism that turns them a bit off with former President Trump. And DeSantis, his battles with Disney have also not made him a favorite with many Senate Republicans. So Senator Scott harkens back to the Tea Party era, that more strident conservatism, fiscal conservatism that really speaks the language of so many who are in Congress and have been congressional Republicans for a long time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Bob, to that point, too, that Scott's the only senator running. Usually Republicans try to run from outside Washington. He told us last month that he actually thinks it's an asset that he has, worked on deals and negotiations and legislation. So we'll see kind of how the public or the voters actually respond. But you mentioned DeSantis. We know that Trump has been eyeing DeSantis as his chief rival. He's obviously, as you mentioned, expected to get into the race later this week. But how has Trump been reacting to Scott's presidential bid?
He's been holding off. You saw his Truth Social post earlier today. He's not taking on Scott in any way. He's saying Scott's not a target. Scott's not a threat. He is the only senator running, as you noted. It's kind of interesting historically because most U.S. senators, having covered them for a long time, you and I have been there in the hallways, most of them look in the mirror every day and they seem to see a future president. And so it's often that a lot of senators jump in, a lot of governors jump in, just Senator Scott this time around. But we'll have to see how this plays out. Senator Scott is someone who has a lot of respect among power players in Washington, in New York, on Wall Street, but he's still not really known by the country. So that $15 million, $20 million from Larry Ellison, that's going to be really helpful in this initial spate of advertising to get Scott's name out there to see if he can catch fire in Iowa, in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and it looks like he is heading out on the campaign trail to Iowa and New Hampshire very soon as well. And I know you will be covering them all. Bob Costa, good to see you. Thank you so much for your reporting.